Before I hand over to Sian, I just thought it was worth saying a little bit about the employee experience in 2022. As we know, it has been quite a challenging year. There's a lot going on. And I just wanted to sort of focus on 5 particular challenges for employees and for organisations this year. So the first of these is hybrid working. This has continued for many of us, and for many of us is now our standard way of working. But for some organisations and for some teams, it is continuing to cause challenges. There are some organisations that are still very keen to get employees back to the office full time. But we have seen that hybrid working has not led to any declines in productivity. Certainly for many employees, it's been quite liberating to be able to work flexibly and to work in a way that suits them. Although it has to be said that for others, it has led to increases in stress and burnout. For some people, they're now finding it hard to really separate their work and home life and feeling that they need to be always on. Earlier this year, there was a lot of talk about the Great Resignation, that employees were leaving their workforces in droves. They were feeling that there were opportunities elsewhere to have better conditions, better working conditions and more flexibility. So a lot of turmoil in the labour market. What we're now hearing more about is quiet quitting, where people are not necessarily leaving their employers, but are not giving 100%. Instead, they're prioritising their work-life balance. A more recent term I'm hearing is career cushioning, and with the changes in the economic environment, a lot of employees are actually thinking that this is the time that they should start to look externally, just in case things happen with their current organisation. So more people are updating their CVs and looking around, which is continuing this uncertainty within the labour market. And certainly we're seeing that skills shortages continue to be a problem for many organisations. Recent research by Hayes identified that 93% of employers were currently experiencing skill shortages, which is up from the last couple of years. And of course, we now have the cost of living crisis, which is putting a lot of pressure on us all, and it is leading to more people thinking about changing jobs as a result. So what we're seeing is a very uncertain time for employees and for organisations, and this does look set to continue. Interestingly, I've recently read a research piece from Harvard Business School, and they identified that CEOs around the world were really seeing talent recruitment and retention as the #1 challenge at the moment, more so than economic uncertainty and stability. So given all of this flux within the labour market, we thought it would be interesting to look at the external benchmarks that we have at People Insight. So when we work with clients, we can provide them with an average score from similar organisations. And what we've done is we've analysed the results from the surveys that we've done in 2021 and 2022 to see how our norms have changed over time. What we typically see is that there isn't much change. But over the last year, we have seen changes in a few areas. The good news first, human-centred leadership and colleague relationships have improved. This is really encouraging. People are more likely to feel that they can help and support each other at work, that their manager makes time to coach and develop them. And encouragingly, senior leaders are seen to be open and approachable. We know that engagement improved during COVID, and one of the reasons for this was that there was more of a focus on human-centred leadership and managers really trying to communicate more, to listen, to offer support to employees. And it's really great to see that that has continued. Less positively, we've seen declines in workload and work-life balance and perceptions of pay. So employees are less likely to feel that their workload is reasonable this year, or that they're able to strike the right balance between their work and home life. And this has been backed up by recent research from Gallup, who are saying that workers' daily stress levels have actually reached a historic high, and that this is a real issue for many organisations. And we're certainly seeing that with the organisations that we are speaking to at the moment. And then declines in pay, perhaps not surprising given the current environment. And I think these findings are at least partly responsible for the number of employees who are now saying that it's less likely that their opinions are sought on decisions that affect their work, or that senior leaders are listening to them. So what this is highlighting to us is the real need to not only run surveys, but to really listen to employee perceptions and to take action to ensure that we're keeping not just engagement, but also well-being high. So yeah, there is this real need to continue to listen to our people, really understand the challenges that they're facing and involving them in ways of working. We saw that the amount of activity in terms of listening increased during the pandemic. And what we're seeing now is that there is a need to really make sure that this becomes part of our ways of working. The pandemic was obviously unprecedented times, but now there's a real need to think about different employee touch points and different topics that really impact the employee experience. And wellbeing is certainly one of those. It's covered in nearly every employee survey that we run, but also many of our clients are doing specific surveys looking at wellbeing. And this is an area that continues to evolve. Initially, the focus was very much on physical well-being, supporting employees to be physically healthy with things like subsidised gym membership. During the pandemic, it moved to a real focus on mental well-being, providing support to employees, increased check-ins, mindfulness apps, etc. became the norm. But we're really noticing now that there is a need for a far more holistic look at well-being. So obviously financial well-being is critical at the moment, really supporting employees to manage their finances. There's also a lot of talk about the need for social well-being, providing that sense of belonging and helping employees to make a contribution. Professional well-being, so really providing the right environment and culture within our organisations and enabling a really inclusive working environment. And environmental well-being, so really looking at our sustainability practices and helping employees to reduce the impact that they have on the environment, which will also help to boost their well-being. So at People Insight, we've developed a model called Thrive, which enables our clients to measure wellbeing holistically. And this really looks at 3 different outcomes. So it looks at enjoyment and flow, it looks at energy and self-efficacy, and it looks at resilience. So to really look at these 3 important outcomes of high levels of positive well-being. And we ask questions around climate and culture, organisational processes, role design, and individual circumstances. And this enables our clients to get a holistic measure of well-being and to really understand where they need to focus effort going forwards to really understand this better. And even without a full survey, there's an awful lot that we can do to support our clients in this area of employee well-being. So, for example, we've got a lot of benchmarking questions that enable you to see how wellbeing compares with other similar organisations. We're able to support with focus groups and to really help our clients to have good conversations about wellbeing in the workplace. And importantly, to ensure that employees are involved in creating actions so that focus is put in the right areas and we're really doing our best to support employees where they need that support the most. So really, to help to bring this to life, I'd now like to hand over to Sian Evans, who's going to share the journey that StepChange has been on and the great work that Sian and colleagues are doing in this area. So firstly, welcome, Sian. We're so pleased that you're with us today. It'd be great if you could just do a quick introduction to StepChange and then share your journey, please.
Hopefully you can hear me now. So thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. So thank you, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sian Evans. I'm the Director of People and Culture at StepChange Debt Charity. So the areas that I'd like to just talk about this afternoon are on the next slide, please. So I'm going to share a little bit about StepChange Debt Charity and who we are and what we do. I'm going to talk about how we support colleague engagement and wellbeing here at StepChange, what we found to be the most impactful actions, how we've taken the opportunity of getting feedback from colleagues on engagement and wellbeing, and what we do with the data when we've got it, and how we can support your colleague financial wellbeing. Thank you. So StepChange. StepChange is a charity. We're based here in Leeds, but we have regional offices throughout the UK. But we have a vision to create a society that's free from problem debt. Now, there's quite quite a difference from our perspective between debt and problem debt. We all pretty much have debt in one way or another, whether that's a mortgage, whether we have credit cards or whatever. But for us, there's a distinction, because when debt becomes too high, when debt takes over someone's life, it becomes a real problem. And we really want to eradicate that. We want to support clients to enable them to get back on their feet and to overcome the difficulties that they faced. So we have a strong mission. We provide free debt advice and solutions for people who are at risk of or struggling with problem debt. And we seek to influence public policy and private sector practices to prevent people from falling into problem debt in the first place. And at the side there are some stats on the number of people that we help. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. So what do we do to support colleague wellbeing? Well, for a long time, we've been focusing very much on well-being being physical well-being, and we've recognised absolutely it's more than that. You can't really differentiate between physical well-being, mental well-being and financial well-being. And so we have partnered with an organisation called Vitality Health, who help us with a wellbeing programme. And it very much puts the ownership, the responsibility onto colleagues as much as it does to the organisation and the management team to actually take ownership for wellbeing. And within that programme, there's an employee assistance programme, which we find incredibly valuable too. Now, equality, diversity and inclusion is morally the right thing to do, but it has such an impact on colleague wellbeing. So for individuals to feel safe, to feel able to really contribute their best within the organisation, they really need to feel part of it. And so our EDI strategy is a critical part of that. Our communication strategy is an important point as well, because we believe that we need to keep our colleagues well informed, and sometimes we don't have the answers to all the questions that they might have, but we do our best to answer the questions in as open a way as we possibly can. Inclusive leadership is critically important for us, and that's psychological safety, where people feel able to challenge no matter who the individual is that they're challenging. That's so important. And as an organisation that is very strong in the public space around total reward and about having sufficient money and resources to avoid problem debt, we need to ensure that our internal culture lines up with that. So there are some important things that we focused on here at StepChange. Thank you. So salary benchmarking is quite critical for us. So we compare ourselves. We use a Mercer methodology to do that, but there are many methodologies that you can use, and I'm sure you are doing. We're a real living wage accredited employer, which again is really very important for us. We're obviously, like many organisations at the moment, we have limited resources and money is tight. And so we are very much focusing our pay review on our lower paid colleagues. So the reason that we're doing that is that we know from the work that we do that everyone lives to their means. But when someone is on a lower salary, they have a less of an opportunity to reduce their expenditure, because, for instance, they may well already be using the value ranges and there's nowhere left for them to go. So we believe it's really important to focus the resources that we have on our lower paid colleagues. Thank you. We have enhanced pension and family leave, because those are important stages in colleagues' lives. And so we don't just believe that when someone leaves us and retires, that's the end of it. We make sure that wherever possible that colleagues are able to contribute into their pension, because if they don't have a sufficient pot when they come to retire, then that's another real risk that they could potentially fall into problem debt then. And similarly with family leave. So it's important that colleagues have sufficient support during those important points in their lives. Thank you. We encourage colleagues to save to protect against financial shocks. And again, we know from the work that we do that so many in society have no savings whatsoever. And then it's only the case of perhaps just one paycheck away from going into problem debt, or a boiler breaks and they have to find some money to pay for something they weren't expecting. So if individuals can save, that's really important. We've made a cost of living payment. We know that we can't possibly afford an inflation-based increase this year. And so we know that colleagues will need help now. And so we've put in place a cost of living payment that's not consolidated, and so won't be a recurring cost for us in years to come, but we want to support our colleagues the best way we can. So that's something that we've done. We provide free breakfast and hot drinks. Now we have a hybrid flexible home working arrangement where colleagues are required to come into the office only 2 days minimum per month. Now, if colleagues want to come in more, they can do. And so we have some colleagues who work predominantly in the office, but most of our colleagues will just come in for team briefs or training and that opportunity to meet up with colleagues. And we provide free breakfast and hot drinks when they do. We provide debt and mortgage advice to our colleagues. And because of the fact that that's what we do as an organisation, we provide it outside of our line management chain, because it can be really quite embarrassing. It can be awkward to talk about problem debt, and we want to try and free up colleagues to feel able to get help when they need it. We have a volunteering policy, and that's something that we know that has a massive benefit to colleagues. The one thing that really makes people feel good is to know that they're helping others. So we have charitable drives throughout the year. So we often have things like a reverse advent calendar where colleagues are encouraged to bring foods in for food bank donations. But volunteering leave, that's something that we have in place for all colleagues to access so that they can go out into the community and do some good work. And that in turn has a massive benefit to colleague wellbeing. We have mental first aiders across the organisation. And of course, because of the work that we do, colleagues are hearing really quite difficult calls from clients right now, so they need that support. And the other thing that we have in place is me time to debrief and decompress when a colleague's taken a particularly difficult call from a client. Thank you. So our most impactful actions. We've set very clear expectations for our leaders, and at the side there's a picture that I know is incredibly small, and if anyone wants to have a look at this, I'm very happy to share it. But we've set the behaviours that we expect of our leaders, and we've launched that with a programme right the way across the organisation. We're really excited at how much benefit that's bringing to us. Thank you. We have that tremendous focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. And in terms of communication, this is something that we really want to ensure that we are so upfront, we're so open, we're so honest. And if there are things that we don't have the answers to, then we'll say that, we'll share that with our colleagues. So one thing that we are clear of, though, is that in our engagement survey, there were some themes there that we recognise are critically important right the way across the organisation. But we also recognise that what one team feels isn't necessarily the same as the experience that another team has. So we've set some charity-wide initiatives, but we've also got some action planning that's specific to teams. And those are the things that we found to be really impactful. Thank you. So how do we get feedback on engagement and wellbeing? Well, we've been working for a number of years now with People Insight, and we run an annual engagement survey with People Insight. But every year we look at the question set and we look to see whether there are any changes that we want to make. But we're also keen, wherever we can, to ensure some continuity of the question set so that we can compare from one year to the next. So we provide time for survey completion. So that can be tough to actually get everyone to complete the survey. And so we designate time for colleagues to do that because we really want to get as much feedback as possible. And then we listen and we cascade the results of the survey, warts and all. And I'll show you how we do that in a few moments. But importantly, we plan and we take action. And we do some very simple quarterly temperature checks throughout the year to see whether we're on track, to see whether we're starting to see things change, to see whether we need to pivot again. And those are really important aspects of what we do. Thank you. So the next couple of slides actually are the infographic that People Insight help us to put together following the engagement survey. And we use this to share the very high level headlines of our survey results with our colleagues. And so you can see there that our overall participation rate was 80%. And our engagement score was 78%, which for us was actually an 8% increase, or 8 percentage point increase on our engagement survey last year. So we're very pleased with the results, but we recognise that there's still so much for us to do. So next slide, please. And this slide shows the items that are the top scorers for us. And so interestingly, one of the top scorers there is I know where to access wellbeing support if I need it. And that's an increase from last year, and the score that our colleagues gave that was 93% this time. And so you can see there the top scorers, but we also share the items, the questions that haven't had such a positive response. And I think that's really important. And so so colleagues believe in the process. They know that they will hear about it, not just on a charity-wide basis, but they'll also hear in their teams as well. And then we share the things that our colleagues have said to us about the best things about working here at StepChange. And we also share the things where colleagues are saying, this is the one thing that would make such a difference for us. And at the moment, one of the key things that we're hearing loud and clear is pay and benefits. And so again, we have much to do. Thank you. So after the engagement survey, what are the next steps? Well, I think the important thing for us is that we don't stop taking action. We don't just close off from last year's survey and then look at the new survey. We look at both of them. And so we continually review and we continually refocus. The charity-wide action areas that we've identified this time are pay me enough, and that's our way of looking at total reward. Don't make my job more difficult. Now, one of the things that our colleagues said was our processes are not as efficient as they could be, and that makes it quite difficult for them. And so we have this programme to look at how we can improve our processes, improve our working environment, and by that really we're talking about EDI. So we know that by investing that time and effort in EDI, that colleagues will feel included, they'll feel part of the family, and that's really important. Colleagues have said that they want more recognition, and so we've identified that. And perhaps one of the most interesting ones is that our colleagues have said to us, be really open and honest, and can you please stop with jargon? So we are being very, very clear in our communication. We thought we were already, but we're working on that. And in each directorate, each area of the charity, we're looking specifically at actions that will make the most difference for that particular team of individuals. And we're monitoring against those. And we're using the portal, the People Insights portal, to help us capture the actions and also check against them. So thank you. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the financial challenge. Everyone knows that there's a major cost of living crisis, and that's pushing millions of people into financial difficulty. Now, we know from the work that we do as a charity that the average person takes 12 months before they reach out for help in terms of their problem debts. And they will have feelings of stigma and shame about the reasons why they've got into problem debt. And we need to ensure that that access is as easy as possible for them. And debt and mental health is so very closely linked. Now, arguably, everyone that comes to us we consider is financially vulnerable, but they may have other vulnerabilities too. And so from our client contact, we know that 56% of all contact into our charity last year, clients had additional vulnerabilities over and above their financial problems. So again, it's so important to consider that. So what are the early signs of problem debt and organisational impact? So frankly, not having enough money at the end of the month, no contingency for those one-off costs, maxing out credit cards and having more than one credit card and churning from one to another and keeping those credit limits going, missed and late payments, and where individuals are not spending sufficient money on food and perhaps even getting additional credit in order that they can pay for food. And we're seeing a lot of clients coming through that have taken buy now, pay later type arrangements. And worryingly, they're doing that for food items as well as for more luxurious items. And whereas we think that perhaps paying for a pizza once in a blue moon, that might be okay, when individuals are actually starting to use buy now, pay later for their everyday living expenses, that's a problem. And so why does it matter to us as employers? Well, when individuals are experiencing problem debt, they will have lower engagement with the organisation because people only have a certain level of ability to deal with issues. And so if they're concentrating so much on their personal difficulties, something's going to tail off. And quite often you'll see that in lower engagement. There'll be increased sickness absence and perhaps even increased addiction problems. There'll be increased colleague turnover. There'll be changes in behaviour. We'll see alcohol abuse potentially, and overall reduced productivity and cost to your organisation. Next slide, please. So just the last thing that I wanted to say really is that at StepChange we partner with many organisations to help them to support their colleagues with their financial health. And so we can do a vast range of different things. We can have a referral route for you. We can help you to run some awareness sessions, and you might even want our flagship digital tool, StepChange Direct, which allows colleagues to discreetly access debt advice. So if you're not sure about what you can do to help your colleagues with financial health and well-being, think about us and we may be able to help you. So thank you.
Thank you, Sian. That was fantastic. So much good stuff there. Really appreciate that. So we have a few minutes left, and as I mentioned, we'd really like to hear from you and to answer your questions. So my colleagues Carolyn and Lizzie have been keeping an eye on chat, and I know some questions came in ahead of the session as well. So I'm delighted to be joined by Lisa, one of my colleagues at People Insight, and I think Oliver is somewhere there as well. Hi, Oliver.
Yeah, hi.
So Carolyn, have any questions come in? Anything that we can answer for?
Sure. Yes, Kate. Hi there. I've got a few questions here to share, and I think the first one really, mentions the kind of how delicate this kind of situation can be around financial well-being for employers. The question is, how can we support employee financial well-being by signposting support without coming across as patronising?
Yes. Shall I take that one?
You go. Thanks. Sian.
Yes, I think there is a fine balance, and what we're finding that some employers are doing is that they're putting posters around their workplaces. They're providing access on intranet sites, pretty much away from work, so that their colleagues can access support. But it's recognizing that actually all of us are experiencing some cost of living pressures, and it doesn't really matter how much someone earns. We all live to our means, and frankly mortgage payments are increasing, interest rates are increasing, the cost of food in comparison to overall expenditure is significantly increasing. And so I think one of the things that I would suggest is to be very open about it yourself. And although you might not experience exactly the same issues that other colleagues will have, I think if you can show some vulnerability yourself, I think that's helpful. But I think having some opportunities where colleagues can engage with it quietly without necessarily needing to talk to their manager about accessing that help is really the way to go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sian. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think it's about making the support available, and it's up to individuals whether or not they take it up. So just to have it out there and to communicate what is available should people want it is really important. Great, thank you. Any other questions, Carolyn?
Yes, I've got a very specific question here for Sian that's come in on the chat, which was about whether could you, Sian, share what your cost of living payment was, or if so, whether you prorated it for staff who work part-time, or kind of how you made that work.
Yeah, of course. Now, of course, we are a charity, we have limited resources, and so the cost of living payment that we've made is a payment of £300, and it's a one-off, and that's before tax. We'd have loved it to have been bigger, but our affordability just wouldn't allow it. We've paid that to all colleagues below our senior leadership team. We haven't prorated it. We thought about it, and then we concluded that actually colleagues that are part-time potentially may have an increased need for it. And so we felt it was more appropriate actually to pay it as a standard payment to all colleagues. Now, of course, if the quantum was bigger, then perhaps we would have taken a different view. But we felt it was the right thing just to pay it in a very simplistic way to all colleagues. We paid it to colleagues who were in their probationary period. And the only real deciding factor on whether or not someone would get the payment is, are they below the senior leadership team, and are they on the payroll on the 1st of December? So that's what we're doing.
Great, thanks, Sian. I'm sure that's very helpful to everyone here.
Another question we've got in is, how do we set realistic expectations on employees regarding inflation versus salary increase Is there any, have you got any comments on that one?
Gosh, well, that's a real challenge, and I think that's a challenge that every organisation is facing. I think the most important thing is to be really open and to share the financial position that the organisation is in a way that's understandable. I know that many organisations will talk EBITDA, they'll talk PBT, etc., etc. We literally talk about the money we have available, the costs that we have, and we bring it to life in that, our model as an organisation, our operating model, doesn't have inbuilt protection against inflation in it, because arguably, as clients' ability to pay down their debts becomes less, then the money that we get from creditors, because all of our advice, all of our support to clients is free, but the voluntary contribution that we get back from our creditors is smaller as a result of that smaller payment that's getting paid over to them. And so we make it very clear that we can't make an inflation-based increase. We'll get as close to it as we can, but I think the important thing is to keep talking about the financial position of the organisation throughout the year, and not just when it gets to pay review time. Don't know whether that's helpful, but those are our thoughts.
Thank you, Sian. Anything from Oliver or Lisa that you'd like to add to that?
I think I completely agree with Sian on a lot of that, but 20 years in HR, I think there is a piece to have lots more transparency in regards to finances of the organisation and simplify it so it's very inclusive. And I do think there's a piece about the transparency of workforce planning. I know that's challenging sometimes too, but that's linked very much to the organisational strategy. And then obviously how pay and reward is reviewed. If there's a transparency around that, people are, kept involved in that. They may not be part of the decision making, but they're certainly communicated with. And I think that just starts to create a very open culture and gets this topic being spoken about rather than just hidden away, and you might see a report each year come out, the annual report. And I know it's challenging for different industries, because it depends on if you're a public body, what does that look like, if you're a commercial business, small businesses. So but I do think that transparency, and I think just building on what Sian said earlier, leadership empathy right now when it comes to financials, and recognizing everyone will be challenged by it, but if there's some empathy, that I think that will really support your colleagues.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lisa.
Very briefly on that, the one thing I'd very quickly add is I think that transparency and so on is so important, and I wouldn't want to duck that issue at all. But I guess also just bringing in the other things, the sort of EVP kind of perspective, and the kind of things you mentioned, Sian, earlier when you were speaking, that the other things you're doing to support people and the benefits that employees have working with you.
Exactly, yeah, the whole sort of culture and proposition that you offer. Yeah, brilliant. Oh, thank you both. I'm really conscious of the time. I know we could talk a lot more, but we are coming up to time. So, Carolyn, probably best if we craft answers to any other questions and send those out to delegates afterwards. Yes,
we'll do that, Kate.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, yeah, just conscious of the time, so just really wanted to say firstly a massive thank you to Sian for speaking and sharing her experiences at StepChange. It's been really, really useful for everyone, and thank you all for joining. One of the things that we do at People Insight is that we support Eden reforestation. So that's something that supports our employees' sustainability, requirements, improves well-being from that point of view, but also something that obviously helps us to as an organisation. So we are planting trees as a thank you to Sian. So 200 trees, and planting trees for each of you who've attended today as well. So yeah, I think that's something that makes us all feel good and happy. But really wanted to say thank you for attending, and please do reach out to Sian, myself and colleagues at People Insight. We'd love to discuss this really important topic with you further. So thank you for your time now, and hope to stay in touch. Many thanks.